I want to acknowledge that we're on the ancestral territories of the Mi'kmaq people, and I want to thank the Mi'kmaq people of today for so generously sharing these beautiful lands in Pictou County with our ancestors, whether they came 400 years ago or 4 years ago. We are all treaty people. And before we get into the agenda, Councillor Donnie Parker informed me he wants to speak on something.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a personal note, I just want to tell everybody in this room that my wife and I are very proud and happy that to welcome a new grandson. He was born last Tuesday, and they don't come very often, so you enjoy it when they come. But his name is Nathan Donald Parker, and his parents are my daughter-in-law Chelsea and Ryan Parker. He weighs 9 pounds 4 ounces, and cute little fellow, 9 pounds. They're not very big. But the mom and the baby are doing great, so I just thought I'd let everybody know. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you for that, Donnie. Now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda for this evening. Like I said, this is a special council meeting to catch up on some things.
So moved.
And who would like to second that?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Turner. Any questions on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, too quick. Go ahead,
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Watt.
Brian, would this be where I can add about Little Harbors, or is it just going to be brought up under that segment?
I had mentioned to the warden that we'd talk about Little Harbor when we're on the Abercrombie levy.
Okay, so we got it moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Maybe I did that. Motion carried anyway. Might be carried twice. So the first thing we're going to do, we have Heather Murphy with us this evening, and she's going to review the 23-24 financial statements with us. So just to remind everybody, this is not what we're dealing with now. This is up to the end, well, 1 year ago today, but you're up to the end of March of 24. You're on then, Heather.
Thank you. Good evening. So for those who haven't seen me before, so if this is your first round of the financial statement presentations, I'm Heather Murphy with firm McDonald & Murphy. We have an office in both New Glasgow and Antigonish. We've been performing this audit for a number of years. So as the warden mentioned, this financial statement report is up to March 31st, 2024 for the fiscal year then ending. There are a number of reports attached to the beginning of the financial statements. The first one being management's responsibility for financial reporting. This report is attached to describe the organization's responsibility to these financial statements. Page 2 and 3 is the auditor's report, and in this we render our opinion on whether or not all the criteria has been met. It also specifies responsibilities of both the auditors and the organization. Our opinion, however, is at the beginning of this report, and in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the county as at March 31st, 2024, and its results of operations and cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with the appropriate accounting standards. Turning to page 4, this is the consolidated statement of financial position. On this statement, the various funds that are being monitored and administered by the county are represented. Those funds include the General Operating Fund, Water Operating Fund, the Internet Operating Fund, and the capital funds for all of those as well, along with some various reserves. So what you see reflected on the statement of financial position include the balances from all of those funds. The financial asset position of the county at March 31st, 2024 is $21.5 million. The makeup of that, of course, is cash, accounts receivable, and some other sources of receivables that were subsequently received. The financial liabilities at the same period and date were $38.4 million. The makeup of which, of course, is some accounts that were paid subsequent to the fiscal year end, and some financing that was in place at March 31st, 2024, in the term of short-term debt at $31.5 million. There are, of course, the non-financial assets reflected, and that's the infrastructure that is owned by the county, the Municipality of the County of Pictou, which equates to $88 million. The total surplus position of the Municipality of the County of Pictou at March 31st, 2024 is $71.6 million. Page 5 is the consolidated statement of financial activities. This report will reflect the revenues and expenditures generated during the last fiscal period with the comparative information provided, as well as the budgetary information.
Excuse me for a second, Heather. If anybody has any questions as we go, are you okay with asking them as
Certainly.
we go?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so if you
I'll
see
try to keep.
something,
Yep.
speak up because you might forget it by the end.
Right. Yes, and I will try to keep my eyes up, but if
I'll
somebody.
let you know if I see a hand.
Perfect. Thank you. The revenue sources for the Municipality of the County of Pictou include, of course, taxes generated, and those equated to $24.2 million. There are a portion of those taxes, of course, that are collected on behalf of others, and those are reflected here as well. The net tax position that's available to fund operations is $18 million. Other sources of revenue included here, of course, are either generated internally or received from external sources. Some of those significant sources include grants for capital purposes, so that relates to ongoing capital projects. So the total revenue recognized for March 31st, 2024 is $31.4 million. The expenditures to carry out the activities for fiscal year end equated to $24.7 million. The makeup of which, of course, is disclosed in the various segments that include, of course, the general government, protective services, transportation services, and so on. This led to a net surplus position of $6.7 million. Of which, of course, is added to the surplus at the beginning of the year, equating to the accumulated surplus position at year end of 71.6.
Thank you. In terms of the revenue, there's a line item here that's not budgeted for. These have an actual of $705,000.
Certainly. This is interest income on the bank accounts. It wasn't expected, of course, to generate the level of interest, but the rates that the bank accounts were experiencing did generate significant revenues. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Very good. Page 6 is a consolidated statement of change in net financial liabilities. And this reflects, of course, the changes relating to those non-financial assets, mainly the acquisition and amortization of capital assets. Page 7 is a consolidated statement of cash flow. And this represents how cash is generated and used during the fiscal period. There is an overall decrease in the cash position of approximately $2 million. Those were the consolidated statements of the financial positions. The next few pages, of course, are the different fund results, to which first is the general operating fund on page 8. This, of course, reflects the resources, those revenues and expenditures generated to operate the general fund. And the overall surplus that's generated before transferred to the operating reserve as required was approximately $278,000. Page 9, the water operating fund. This also, as it suggests, reflects those resources generated and expended to carry out the water operating activities. The water operating fund generated a surplus of approximately $90,000, bringing the water operating fund into a surplus position of just $200 by the end of fiscal year. Page 10 is the schedule of general capital fund. This reflects those capital infrastructure additions that were made during the fiscal period and how those capital additions were funded. So for the $813,000 capital additions, those were all funded from internal resources during the fiscal year. Page 11 also reflects those water capital transactions in terms of the additions of $1.3 million. And again, these amounts that were funded from internal resources fully during the year. Page 12 reflects the water capital financial position. So this represents those assets and liabilities of the water capital fund. Page 13 is a schedule of the internet fund. At the top of the page is the operating fund. That does reflect, again, those resources generated and used for operating purposes, and the net expenditures. So it did experience a deficit of around $911,000 to bring it to an accumulated operating deficit of $1.3 million. The bottom of the page reflects the Internet Capital Fund, and again reflecting those additions, capital additions of $18 million, and how those were funded. So some of that, of course, as you can see, was funded from capital grants. 9.5 of the 18 million was funded from grants, and the remainder was funded from external financing, and that being the short-term borrowing. Page 14 reflects the reserve funds. And the reserve funds that are being maintained by the Municipality of County of Pictou. The list of those funds are, of course, provided at the bottom of the page. The total transactions for all of the funds are combined within, but the resources that are included, the revenue that's being recognized is $1.8 million, most of which, of course, is the Canada Community Building Fund grant that's received annually. That was historically referred to as the gas tax fund. And then, of course, some interest income is also being reflected here. There are some expenditures that are incurred by the reserve funds, and of course those are disclosed here as well in detail. So overall, there has been a change in those reserve funds to a net amount of approximately $140,000. Page 15 is the consolidated statement of property and equipment, and this will reflect the infrastructure that the municipality of County of Pictou maintains, and the segmented between general, internet, and water capital fund. So this, of course, reflects those additions and some correlating amortization for the various funds to reflect the total of the 88 million that we saw from the initial schedule. Page 16 reflects the makeup of where these fund balances are, of the 71.6 million, where they reside in terms of the operating and reserve funds or the capital funds. So from the operating and reserve funds, the 71.6 million, 10.9 million of that is within the operating and reserve funds, with the remaining in the capital funds. Page 17 is a consolidated schedule of segmented disclosure. This schedule has been included to report the revenues and expenses under the various segment by some defined expense categories, and of course to allocate the tax and other revenues across the various segments. So it does provide for some information in terms of the annual surpluses that are generated under each segment, with of course the total being 6.7 million. I'll just briefly peruse through some of the notes, not really in detail, just take you through quickly. So 18 and 19 through to 21 are all the accounting policies. So these just describe how the numbers were arrived at and accounted for. On the bottom of page 21, of course, we're reflecting that there is a new policy and it has been implemented, but no changes as a result of the new policies. Page 22 provides some information in terms of the tax receivable and more of a breakdown of what the taxes that were assessed and those amounts collected during the year. Page 23, this again provides for some detail on some of the valuation allowances on uncollected taxes. So this is growing as a result of some of the tax accounts becoming more than current. So that of course has been adjusted accordingly. There is a pension plan in place and of course the disclosure of the cost associated to the county. There is some restricted tax sale surpluses being maintained and held. So a schedule, of course, to describe those amounts still on hand. Page 24 speaks to those area rates. Again, the taxes collected and the expenditures reflected for those various taxes. Boards and commissions, of course, you do provide some annual commitments and contributions to other areas. And of course, those are all described here as well. Page 25 speaks to the commitments. So these are ones that the Municipality of County of Pictou has in place as far as its participation in with some agreements as it relates to the Pictou County Wellness Center Building Authority and the Pictou County Shared Services of the Aberdeen Hospital Renovation Project. There is, of course, also some commitments that are in place expected annually for the Rural Broadband Project. On the bottom of page 25 is the description of the short-term debt. Subsequently, there has been a debenture in place for a portion of that, but at March 31st, 2024, there was the RBC financing in place of $31.5 million. Page 26, of course, this describes the participation in the investment in New Scotland Business Development Corporation. And the note disclosure required to disclose the remuneration and reimbursed expenses that have been issued during fiscal year. And the last page to the notes, asset retirement obligations. So as we were obliged to include last year, any future asset obligations. And the Municipality of County of Pictou did have a significant one that has been almost completely funded. There is still a small amount outstanding, but most of that related to the one facility, the one school that has been already struck down.
Taken
Yes.
down.
Yes, thank you. So those were the notes to the financial statements. The remaining pages provide for more detailed breakdown of what's included in the revenues and expenses. It's there for your information, and certainly if there was more pointed questions on some specific issues, we can spend some time on those, but otherwise we've seen that information in more totals, total reflected in the previous pages.
Okay, that it then, Heather?
That is the end of the story for today.
Thank you. And before I ask for questions, I just want to clarify, in case anybody's listening online tonight or whatever, you quickly glossed over pension plan. That's for our employees, not for us.
Correct.
Somebody might
Yes.
hear that the wrong way, and there's
No.
been lots of municipalities who got themselves in trouble with pension plans, so no pension plan for us, but this is a pension plan for employees.
That would be true.
Okay. All right, that was a bit of a rush job for sure, but anybody that has further questions can ask them now. Go ahead, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Are the audited financial statements consistent with the results that would be shown in the internal financial statements that they're monitored by our audit committee? So is there any discrepancy between what they see in terms of financials and what you see? Is there any discrepancy between those two sets of numbers? We have an internal audit committee. right?
Yes.
Been there.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if there's any, if you found any discrepancy between what they see and what you see. Do you know what they see?
No, not in terms of reports that would be consistent with the formats that you have here for the year end. And of course, the audit committee has been through these in great detail. Perhaps what's easiest to answer is the fact that we didn't make any significant journal entries to the accounting records during the audit. So that would suggest that if they're extracting the information from the accounting system, that they're getting that information that should be consistent with this. Yeah.
So there's no real weaknesses in the internal controls and the accounting policies that we have here? Would you consider any weaknesses that we have?
So the internal controls, we do issue a management letter that does speak to some opportunities for improvement. We do have that management letter that, again, we've gone through in detail, in great discussion. And there are some room for improvement in certain areas. The accounting function itself, internally, we rarely find that there's issues, that the controls that are in place are being followed. the enhancements that we typically find that we bring to the audit committee's attention more so have to do with the connection between the reporting and in this case the external preparation of some of those reports, bringing that into the internal system. So there is some of that opportunity for improvement that I brought up previously with the audit committee, and that mainly had to do with the internet fund, where that is not being carried out in the same internal fashion, that there is some enhancements that could take place that would make that position a little more clear.
Yeah, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah.
On page 22, interested in this, and I don't know if this question is Heather or CAO. Percentage of taxes collected emerged at 85.1%. Is that a drop below the percentage? Or is it on higher? So where would we figure that out? And if it's not tonight,
I think it's, we can get you that. I think it is one of the what are they, the financial condition indicators. So we can get that. The report isn't out yet, so.
Okay, and Councillor Bailey. Or I got the wrong one, Councillor Wadden. I see a light.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. Just from the audit committee perspective, I do have a few notes that we discussed that night, perhaps a council might be interested in it. And the first thing is that the management letter, I'm just wondering why it doesn't go to all councillors. Is there a reason why it just goes to the audit committee? Because that did give us a lot of information that we could go through and ask the questions on the audit report, which I think is really important for all councillors to have a look at. Does anybody know?
Yeah, we can do that. Typically, it's only ever gone to the audit committee.
Okay, I think that would be a really good idea, because I think it would help with a better understanding of some of the things we saw that night. And like Heather said, she mentioned the internet fund. There's a business plan, but there's no budget for the internet, and that is, it should have a similar format as our tax budget. So that's something that we're aware of and we want to see happen. The capacity of the financial department, that is a concern to us, the staffing. There's a lot of work, like we said, this audit committee report, this audit statement is a year behind. That's not good. And we thought last year we were going to get it done around December. We'd really hoped to get it a few months earlier, and we failed at that. And we failed at it because of the internet. Again, it was so, the numbers were slow coming in. So in-house might be the better way to go. And I think you talked about perhaps by the end of 2026, we might see the in-house financial reports for the internet. But that still gives us a couple of years to go through. So it's still not looking good for getting our financials ready by the end of September, which is the date they should be done. The New Scotland Business Park, financially, the reports aren't coming in very timely, and I think we're going to have the discussion with them to see if they can get the reports to us in a more timely fashion. And I don't know if that's happened or not yet, Brian, but hopefully that will get that aspect of the report done a little better. Wind power, you see a significant drop in the wind power, and they don't have anyone to fix them, or they didn't up until our meeting that night, but apparently there is a company out there that Brian was going to talk to, so that may have an impact on it next year. But you can see the money from the wind towers is down considerably. And I think the wellness center, there was concern with the lack of meetings, I think, with the wellness center. That was brought up, and again, we talked about the deed transfer tax, and there is more money in the deed transfer than we had anticipated, and I'm not really sure how the decisions are made to spend money. I know one of the things that came out was that $200,000 was donated to the SPCA, which is a fine organization. I'm not unruling that, but it was just a surprise to us as councillors that night that $200,000 came from the D-transfer to the SPCA without council's knowledge. So I think things like that should be fixed up so that we're aware of some of these things that are happening. So, that's why I think this management letter would be beneficial to all the councillors to see. So. And I want to thank Heather again and Karen for all the work they do, because the audit committee has, that's been one of our goals, is to get some extra staffing in the finance department. It is desperately needed, and I think council really has to get that in their budget and start pushing to get more staff in our finance department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wadden. I don't see any more lights looking around all the corners. So if there's no more questions, so we're open to a motion now. Is that we're looking for a motion to approve the audited financial statements up till March 31st of 2024. Would somebody like to make that motion? Okay, moved by Councillor Wadden, second by Councillor McKeel. One last chance for any questions. Okay, we'll have the vote on that. All those in favor? Aye. Against? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Heather. Job well done again, and appreciate you being able to go through it with us for the benefit of everybody. I know you'd already gone through it in more detail with the audit committee, but it's good for everybody to have at least a basic knowledge of what's happening in their finances. And I'll take this opportunity too to thank Karen in particular, and anybody who helps her here in the financial end of things for keeping us on track and doing a great job every year. Thank you all. Okay, so at this point we'll move on to our land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy discussion. So just to remind everybody, we got to the point of second reading and public hearing, and kind of got stalled there because, well, one particular thing to do with down the Antigonish borderline with our municipality, but also it gave the Planning Advisory Committee an opportunity to review with Mr. Watson, you know, some of the other public concerns that had come up, and so there were changes recommended from the PAC, which will come here tonight, and these mostly come out of concerns from the public following the first reading. And so if we come to agreement on what the PAC is bringing forward tonight, then we will move to first reading again on our April meeting, and hopefully to second public hearing again and second reading on our May meeting. So is the plan for Ian to go through this with us? I notice he's up on here somewhere. So Ian, are you prepared to go through what changes we made following or during our PAC meeting? Okay, I'll let you take over at this point and explain, then we'll have to have some votes on whether we go ahead with those changes or not. They're going to amplify it a little bit.
Can you see that screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, as the warden mentioned, you did consider these documents at a public hearing and for second reading, and sent them back to PAC for further discussion. PAC met, I believe it was on the 12th, to review the comments from the public, as well as the issue around source water protection, and directed some amendments, not all, in response to the public comment feedback. They were all discussed, and some took action, or we took action on some of them, and others felt the documents were suitable as is. So just as a reminder, with these planning documents, we have to meet 5 statements of provincial interest: housing, infrastructure, agriculture, drinking water, and flood risk areas. And we also have to be consistent with the minimum planning requirements regulations. We have to have planning, it has to be comprehensive, we have to review these documents every 10 years. And finally, under those regulations, there are also engagement programs, contents regulations that we must also be consistent with as a municipality. And this is important because these documents will be sent off to the off to the Department of Municipal Affairs once council has adopted some version of them for review against all of these requirements. And if they are found to be potentially lacking, they bump it up to the minister for review, and the minister can at that point approve the documents as drafted, can amend the documents and approve them, or can send them back to the municipality. Why this is important is because it was brought to our attention late in the process that we had missed the Antigonish source water protection area, the James River watershed, and one of the requirements of the statement of provincial interest on drinking water is that you identify all public drinking water supplies within the bounds of the municipality. And I apologize, this was an oversight on our part. The watershed is primarily within Antigonish. It serves both the town and the county, parts of the county, but it does have a small portion that extends into the eastern side of Pictou County. So fundamentally, the first thing these drafts from PAC do is identify the James River watershed in both the plan and the land use bylaw, thereby meeting that requirement. We are, of course, also required to implement protections within the planning documents for those water supplies. And there was a number of comments at the public hearing from the towns requesting different types of protections for their water supplies. Planning Advisory Committee discussed all the different requests and landed on a recommendation for a number of things here to address the different comments and again to meet that statement of provincial interest. First of all, so you may recall previously in the previous drafts we had the New Glasgow primary watershed for the primary watershed at Forbes Lake, as well as the town of Pictou well fields within the shoreline zone. That zone requires larger lot sizes. It requires or it limits the uses to things that are relatively benign and from a land use point of view. So that was providing some protection for those water sources. As a result of PAC's discussion, we have also added the shoreline zone, S1 zone, to the Trenton whale fields. These are primarily within town, but the 25-year recharge area does extend into the municipality. So those well fields are also now protected under the shoreline zone. The town of New Glasgow had requested at the public hearing that so there is a watercourse buffer, and under the last draft, that watercourse buffer around Forbes Lake was set at 50 meters. So all development would have to be a minimum of 50 meters from Forbes Lake. The town requested that to be increased to 75 meters, and Planning Advisory Committee agreed and increased that in this recommended draft. This addresses, so these changes, we've now addressed the town of Pictou, the town of New Glasgow, primary watershed, and the town of Trenton. We also have the secondary watershed for Forbes Lake, which is much larger, covers a large land area. We have that portion of Antigonish, and we have the Stellarton water supply, which draws from the East River and has a very, 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 very large watershed. The statement of provincial interest recognizes that, on some of these large watersheds, surface water areas that cover a very large land area, there needs to be a balance between restrictive land use and protecting the drinking water supply. So those areas are recognized. They don't have the direct protection of the S1 zone, but they do have other protections that I'll talk about in a second. In doing all of this, we've completely rewrote the preamble for the source water protection areas in the plan to better show the link between what we've done in these documents and how it meets the statement of provincial interest, hoping to remove any risk there that the department or the minister would flag this as an issue. Also related to that, and coming out of the town of New Glasgow's request, PAC directed that we remove hobby livestock farms from the list of uses permitted in the shoreline zone. And then we've changed it so that, so in the previous drafts, anytime there was a rezoning request or a development agreement proposal for intensive uses like heavy industry or that kind of thing in one of the well fields, that it would be referred to the town, the appropriate town, for comment. We've, coming out of PAC's discussion, we have changed that so that all rezoning requests and development agreement proposals within a well field area or within a source water area would be referred to the appropriate municipality for comment, and that the municipality will take action as appropriate. Just to be clear here, development agreements and rezonings within a well field can only be considered if there's policy for it. So it's not that development agreements are automatically a way to get around zoning. They are they have to be enabled by the zoning and by the policy. So, for example, in the shoreline. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I see two lights on. Councillor Dewar?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So what's this mean, we remove hobby livestock farms from list of uses permitted in shoreline S1 zone?
Yeah, so the shoreline S1 zone that applies to, since we've removed it from the coastal areas, now only applies to the Trenton well fields, the town of Pictou well fields, and the primary watershed of Forbes Lake. That zone in the previous drafts had allowed hobby livestock farms as a list of permitted uses. The PAC recommended that that be removed. Any existing hobby livestock farms in those areas would be continue to be permitted as non-conforming. It's just new ones would be limited in those 3 drinking water supplies.
So that's just within the 75 meters, is that what you're saying?
No, it'd be within the whole shoreline zone. So those zones,
Never discussed that. The town in Glasgow, they get the biggest farm of anybody. They must have 2,000 geese in that lake down there. So that night I mentioned the same thing, what were you talking about? And they were just busy looking at each other. They didn't have an answer really. So that covers an awful lot more people than just what you may be thinking. I'm fine with it with 75 feet around it, but
75 meters.
75 meters, that's all right. And like you said, it's only for going ahead, but there's, that's too open. I don't think that's right at all. That's just my opinion, but I'm sure we could fill a place here tonight and people would agree with me.
How wide a distance from, what is the setback that this applies to in?
so this is specifically to the S1 zone. So I'll bring up a zoning map here and I'll zoom in on them here just a second. Let's see here. How do I do that? So share windows. Okay. So you can see the zoning map here, okay?
Yes?
So first of all, this is the area. So this is the town of Pictou here in the hatched area. This light blue is the extent of the S1 zone that extend, or of the town of Pictou well fields that extend into the municipality. So that light blue color is that shoreline S1 zone. So those particular properties would be included in that.
What's the distance, Ian, from the wells, and what, I think that's what Councillor Dewar's getting at, what is the setback distance?
So for well fields, for wells, it's not a specific distance. They do it by the underlying geology. It's basically a measurement of how long it would take for any contamination to travel through the ground to the wells. So they draw the well fields on that basis. So it's not a specific distance. It's related to geology underneath.
And what about Forbes Lake then?
So for Forbes Lake, well, maybe before I get to Forbes Lake, since I'm looking at it right now, we'll go to Trenton. So there's the extent of Trenton there. Again, a small portion of their well fields extend into the municipality. And then Forbes Lake is there. So again, all that light blue.
And is it a specific setback, like is it the 75 meters or 150 or?
No, this isn't a specific distance. This is the watershed, the primary watershed for that lake. So that would be the lands, the primary lands that drain into Forbes Lake.
So again, as Councillor Dewar was saying, maybe there'd be a lot more concern if people knew how big that area was. I'm not so sure that's well understood by everybody even here. You know, when you say there's no hobby farms, but it goes back maybe a lot farther than what we figured.
Yeah, and that's certainly why we, Mr. Chair, why we had, concerns with some of the town of New Glasgow had requests for even more stringent controls. And that's certainly why we had some concerns around implementing those stringent controls this late in the game without a chance to engage. So, that may be appropriate to have those more stringent controls, but it would be something that should be done through,
He's coming
So
to the
Stellarton-
Stellarton one, I think.
yeah, so Stellarton, it's very large. It's the whole, I'll bring it up just a second here. It's the whole watershed for the East River. So just give me a second. Down so can you see that there?
You don't have to have a hobby farm in there?
No, so we have not put because the Stellarton watershed is so massive, it's all the way to the county boundary there in the south almost. The statement of provincial interest on drinking water recognizes that for these very large surface watersheds, your land use controls need to be more of a balance between protecting the water source and enabling people to go about their business. So for this very large surface water source that for the East River, we have not put the shoreline zoning on that area.
So what is the protection then in that area if it's not S1?
So, yeah, so in that case, so in this one and in the secondary watershed for Forbes Lake, as well as for that small portion of the Antigonish watershed, what would happen? The protection there is that anytime there was a proposal for a rezoning or a development agreement, that you would refer it to the appropriate town for comment, and you as a council would take action in response to that comment, whatever that appropriate action may be. And then the other thing is, and this is on the next slide that I will about to get to in a second, but that in all the public source water areas, regardless of the underlying zoning, certain high impact uses or high risk uses would be prohibited. So things like heavy industry, hazardous industry, automobile fueling, scrap yards, and solid waste disposal, mineral related uses, warehousing and light industrial uses involving bulk storage of chlorinated organic compounds, petroleum solvents, or petroleum fuels, excluding propane. So basically, uses where that are involving chemicals or petroleum fuels that could be spilled and contaminate the water source. So that would apply in all of them. But that hobby livestock restriction would only be on the ones that are zoned S1.
Okay, I think we probably hit a bump here in terms of these hobby farms in the S1 zone seems to be. Do you want to keep going and come back to that, or do you want to deal with that now?
I'll leave that to your pleasure, I guess.
Okay, I got Councillor Donnie Parker as his lead on.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My question is around this source water protection for the East Rivers, the town of Stellarton. You get almost 20% of the county, if you look at the map, in that water protection for the town of Stellarton. Well, there's all kinds of farms up and down those river valleys. And on your source water protection, there's a whole lot of things not allowed, but one is solid waste disposal. I don't know if that includes manure, but most of them farmers spend manure on their fields. Does that mean they're not allowed to spread that anymore, or?
No, sorry to cut you off there, through you, Mr. Chair. That would be specifically, that's a defined use in the land use bylaw, and that would be specifically like landfills, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay, but there's a lot of restriction there. You got 20% of the county there almost in that area to protect the water for town of Sterling. It just seems like it's a huge area to put under, that much restriction, but anyway.
I don't think he's not putting it under the S1 zone, that Stellarton. They would have to, if somebody wanted to build in that large area or do something, they'd come here, and we'd have to give permission to do it, but it's not saying they can't do it.
Okay.
And we would have to consult with the particular town, whichever one, in that case Stellarton, but, take it into consideration, but they're not telling us that, what we have to do. We have to, they're saying we have to work with them to see, if somebody wanted to put a junkyard in there.
Well,
Basically says that you can't, but I mean, some other type of development, they'd have to come through us rather than have the S1 zone.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
The S1 is a concern though in the primary watershed. I guess, I don't think I understood it well the other night. I understood that we were going 75 meters back and wouldn't be able to do, have a hobby farm or whatever within the 75 meters, but there doesn't appear to be any set distance now. So what I did bring up the other night, and I'll bring it up again because Councillor Dewar has mentioned something similar to that, is we haven't consulted with the people that live around that lake, that own the land, I should say, around that Forbes Lake. And nobody wants that to be polluted at all. It's our water too that comes in there and everything, but we need to have an equal hearing here somehow. I guess they can come to this final reading, but we haven't consulted, I don't believe we have anyway, with the landowners. And if you're going much longer ways back, then maybe we need to hear their voices. I did bring that up, and I don't know if what was said the other night, if we should do that or shouldn't do it or what. I'll leave it with you, Ian, as to, and I'll leave the other members that were here for that meeting, if everybody understood it was a lot farther than the 75 meters that these hobby farms would be restricted in or not. I may have understood it wrong. Anybody else here that night that wants to speak to it? Go ahead, Ronnie.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I was under the understanding that the hobby farms could not be inside that 75 meters. I was not aware of this larger amount, and we don't even, and Ian, how big is that larger, how far back is that larger amount, like in meters?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just give me a second here. I will give you a rough, again, it varies depending on the part of the lake, because it's related to the topography and how water drains. But just give me 1 second here. I can give you a rough estimate. Do a measurement for you. Where are we here? Forbes Lake. Okay. So that smaller lake, Calder Lake, that the S1 zone does, that the primary watershed extends to, is about 2 kilometers from Forbes Lake. So the largest, it's about the area that's covered by that S1 zone is about 2 kilometers top to bottom, and is probably, let me give a rough estimate here, probably 1.5 kilometers wide, I would say.
Big area anyway, a lot bigger than the 70 meters away. Councillor McHale, sorry for missing it.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. My question is, I just need a point of clarification. What is considered a hobby livestock farm? Some people that might be a few chickens in the backyard, and other people it might be 25 head cattle. I think we need some clarification on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Dan.
through you, Mr. Chair. So hobby livestock for us now, granted, it's our position that these land use bylaws don't regulate the animals themselves. The animals aren't development. so we're not regulating the animals themselves. What we are defining a hobby livestock farm as.
Define it there in the definitions.
Yeah, the use of buildings or part thereof for sheltering of livestock on a limited scale and without expectation of such livestock being a primary source of income. And then there's a maximum size on the building. So basically we're regulating we're defining a livestock operation or a hobby livestock farm as a buildings for the sheltering of animals, and no larger than 100 square meters, which is just over 1,000 square feet. So it's basically permission to build a barn of just over 1,000 square feet for the purpose of keeping animals.
Okay, so that is the definition, so that, could be a pretty good sized beef farm, if you just need to do a shelter. Go ahead, Councilor Dewar.
Thank you. This is totally different than what I understood from the first. I have one farmer, two farmers, big farmers, that half their land would be on the Forbes Lake side, and the rest of their farm is on the Stubborn side. Like the river's there, everybody up the river, there's farms all along the river, right from Plymouth, right in the community of Plymouth, the river road, and then you get up to McGregor's. Well, they're the biggest farmers in Pictou East, and they use everybody's land, and it's the same all the way along right to Sunny Brae. And that's where all those farms are. And I'm not saying there's gonna be many more buildings, because a lot of the farms are disappearing, although McGregor's are bringing them a lot of those farms back, right? And they go by the right practice of doing stuff. So I think there's a whole lot here we didn't know about when you're talking about kilometers, and you're being pretty general. Calder's Lake's the first lake, then there's Grant's Lake, and then there's McKinnon Lake. There's every lake imaginable up in there, okay? And a few other ones. So I guess it doesn't really matter to the councilors that don't have a farm or don't know anything about a farm, but the ones that do, it's important. Like, even myself, my land, I border into Grant's Lake, 68 feet into the water where the post is, and into the East River, the west branch of the East River, okay, Elgin. And that's the same with all the farmers along there. And you're saying, well, there's not many farmers left, but the ones that are, I guarantee you wouldn't get out of your vehicle if you came up and noticed we weren't allowed to do that, or that your name would be on a stone somewhere. But anyway, it's just, we're not doing things right here. It was gonna be 75 meters, and that's the way it should be, unless there was pressure came from somewhere else that the money wasn't coming from the taxpayers of the municipality of Pictou County to make the decision. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councilor Donnie Parker next, and then Logan. Oh, you're good? Oh, sorry. Oh, I can never tell who's like who's there. Okay, I'll take Logan first, and then go to you. Well, you got
I
something?
just want to explain
All right.
something. It has nothing to do with the property along the East River, where the Stoughton watershed is. That has nothing to do with it. It's just around the Forbes Lake and up to that other little lake. It has nothing to do with the existing farms or any future farms that are going beyond that, down that shoreline. It's only around that area that Logan showed in the blue, right? That's the only place for Forbes Lake. It is.
That was 3 kilometers, and he just estimated it's not 3 kilometers. To the end of that, the blue that we just seen would be 5 kilometers or 7 kilometers.
Was the understanding that night that it was?
That was my understanding. It was in the blue area under the S1. That was my understanding. But it's up to this council if you want to put it back in or leave it on. But the thing is, it was there to protect the water sources, right? So.
All right, I'm gonna go to Logan next. Go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. And actually, it's just sort of bouncing off Councilor Palmer's point. It seems like there's some confusion between what is the S1 zone versus the source water protection area. So they're two different things. So what Ian had shown us was a source water protection area, not the S1 zone. So the S1 zone is the area, that's why Ian didn't mention Stellarton in that, in the S1 zone. The S1 zone only applies to Forbes Lake, to the Trenton watershed, Wellfield watershed, and Pictou. And it's those areas that are not allowed to have hobby farms. The source water protection area, so I mean, we have a whole bunch of drawings here, which is, a lot to go through. The source water protection plan area includes all of those areas around those places I just said, but they also include areas around the East River. That's where East River and Stellarton source plays into it, as well as ammunitions. So it's those areas have different restrictions. You're still allowed to have hobby farms there, unless you're in the S1 zone, but you're still allowed to have hobby farms there. Page 30 of the document, section 7.3.1, that's where you find the prohibited uses in the source water protection plan areas. So hobby farms isn't on that list.
Read off what is on the list.
So on that, yeah. On the list is automobile fueling, automobile washing, cemeteries, hazardous industrial uses, heavy equipment repair, heavy equipment sales and rentals, heavy industrial uses, mineral-related uses, scrap yards, solid waste disposal, and warehousing and light industrial uses involving the bulk storage of chlorinated organic compound, petroleum solvents, or petroleum fuels, excluding propane. So I just want to make the point, and it's just bouncing off of what Councillor Palmer said, that, the source water protection plan areas, they can be found on the source water protection plan mapping. The S1 zoning is what you see that Ian's showing there. That's the zoning plan. That's where you can see the S1 zoning. For shoreline protection. Shoreline protection is more restrictive. Source water protection plan area is less restrictive. Shoreline S1 zone, you can't have hobby farms under these proposed rules. The source water protection plan areas have all those restrictions that or propose all those restrictions that I just listed off. So just so that we're clear on what the two different areas are, because they're related, but they're different.
So just to be really clear, Ian, on this blue zone you got there, which is a couple kilometers wide or whatever you said, I think. So there's no
Yep.
hobby farms anywhere within that blue area.
That's the way it's used.
Is
Yes,
that
just
correct?
within that blue area, there are existing farms. They would be considered non-conforming, aka grandfathered. But new ones within just that blue area would be
Does
limited.
that
Would be
area,
limited.
how wide did you say that was again, that blue area?
My rough measurement, I would say 1.5 kilometers wide.
From the lake or the total width?
Total width,
Total width.
about 2-ish by 1.5-ish.
Go ahead, Councillor Dewar.
So now, for instance, if McGregor's or McLean's were to buy land, buy other farms all along that river, is that still all right? Or is it because it's only what they have now? Because they're expanding, if they're going to expand? As
Through you, Mr. Chair,
long as it's their company or their farms, that'd be all right? Or do they got some other path they have to take?
Go ahead, Ian.
yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, there would be no restriction on them if it was along the river. If it was all in this beigey area, there would only be restriction if it was in those blue areas. Anyone could buy an existing farm there and continue to operate it. They could pass it to children. They could keep running their business. It's just if you wanted to set up a new hobby farm with hobby livestock farm specifically within this blue area, then you would have restrictions. But anywhere else along the East River in that beige area would not be a problem.
Okay, so we'll have that all in writing in this plan, that if they're gonna get bigger or give it to their family to continue farming, it'll be there? That's not just something we're using tonight to get something passed, is it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. That's actually in the Municipal Government Act itself, that existing uses are considered legally non-conforming, which is a good thing. They are quote unquote grandfathered, and that can be passed passed on to other people, sold, all those things. They're protected under that non-conforming status in the legislation itself.
Okay, is there any more comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
Just on Councillor Doerr's point, so if there's a lot of the larger farms that in order for you to be economically viable, and you have to consolidate land around here. It's not like you get a quarter like you would out in Manitoba or Saskatchewan. A lot of these farms are cobbled together over time, and so if there's an existing farm that's available to purchase and it's not presently being operated as a farm, but the dairy farmer or whoever wants to purchase that land to farm, is that going to be considered an extension of his operation? Like, is that going to be a issue?
Does it have to be an active farm? If that farm sat for 10 years without being an active farm, and one of those families we're talking about decide to buy it up and farm it, are they going to have to come here and ask, or how's that work?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So that non-conforming use status does have a caveat on it, that if you discontinue the use for more than 6 months or a year, I can't remember if we switched up to a year in this document. Either way, there is a time limit on it. If that use ceases for that amount of time, it loses its non-conforming status. That being said, these documents do not regulate the agricultural activity itself. They don't regulate, the cropping. They don't regulate pasturing. So if you were to buy up, nowhere in these documents do we say you can't farm any land. So if you wanted to buy up land for that wasn't actively farmed and put it under crop, there's nothing in these documents that would restrict that. The one thing that could be restricted is if you wanted to buy land in that blue area and get permission to build a barn that was to house livestock, then there would be a restriction as currently drafted in those shoreline blue areas.
Okay, not seeing any more lights on. Are people, go ahead, Joe.
Ian, through you, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. Has the towns and the stuff been asked if this was good enough, or are we going to go through a round two, the next thing, and say they're going to come back and say this is no good or not up to their snuff or whatever? Have they been consulted with these changes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, due to the tight timelines, we haven't had a chance to follow up with the towns. You may still hear from them as part of the public hearing. All that being said, I think the changes that we've made put you much more squarely on side with the statement of provincial interest. Ultimately, it's up to, that's what matters at the end of the day from a legislative point of view. I certainly have your relationships with the towns to think about as well, but from a legislative point of view, I think we've put ourselves much more squarely on side with this draft. You may still hear some comments. The town of New Glasgow had very specific requests, and the Planning Advisory Committee discussed them and did accommodate some of them, but not all of them. One of those was the town of New Glasgow wanted the secondary watershed for Forbes Lake to also be included in that shoreline zone. So actually more than doubling the area that was included, but PAC discussed that and felt that was was pushing that limit in terms of how many people were impacted without a chance to really engage.
One final
Okay.
question.
Go ahead, Joe.
And in an S1 zone, if a new family moves in and buys property there and their kids wants to have a few chickens and that stuff, they're not allowed, are they?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if it was a couple of chickens and they weren't building a barn for them, there's nothing that would restrict that. It would be if they wanted to come in, if there wasn't already an existing animal housing barn and they wanted to come in and get permission to build one, that's where they would see restrictions would be on the construction of the animal barn itself within that S1 zone.
They could come to council and ask permission to do that? Or not, no?
Through you, or to you, Mr. Chair, I suppose not for that, no, not specifically, or they could ask for you to change the rules, but it wouldn't be a kind of thing where there was a discretion to whether you allowed some people to do it or not others, but it'd be going to the development officer for a permit, and the development officer would say, no, it doesn't meet the bylaw. If you want to apply to change the bylaw, we can take that to council.
Okay, you all right, Joe? Oh, go ahead, Darrell. Oh, sorry.
I guess my concern, Mr. Warden, thank you, is what size, like, I don't know, I was raised on a farm and, you know, my family's farmed for generations and generations and generations, and, I don't know, maybe it's illegitimate, I'm not sure, but, what is the size that right now that we have to come to, like, if I was to build a barn on my property, what's the minimum requirements for that? Like, the smallest size that I have to come and get a building permit for? Does anybody know it? Answer that?
215 square feet.
215 square feet. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people that's turning towards that, kind of getting back to our roots and stuff, and I don't know, I have some reservations, I guess. I have to think more about this.
This, of course, is only in these water buffer areas. They're not in the rest of our G1 zone, which is most of the county, but my concern is a few people, maybe, I don't know how many, that maybe don't even know this is going on, especially in the secondary water district, you know, and could suddenly find out that, oh, I didn't realize they changed the rules. Go ahead.
If I may continue, you know, I think that if someone wants to buy, you know, some pigs or whatever, goats or whatever to feed their family, they should be able to do that. You know, that even,
And
I don't know.
they can in G1.
And they can, but if they're in S1, they cannot.
That appears to be the case.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Councilor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we come to a conclusion on the topsoil operations and how that's defined? Did we find any further information on that?
Yeah.
Or are we going to stay on the
I
watershed?
think we should until we
Okay.
solve the watershed and get something. Then
That's
we go
fine.
to that one.
So I'll ask my question later.
Yeah, I think he'll be coming to that sooner or later. Councilor Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the end of the day, we're just trying to protect the water source. Right? It's a small, I realize how important it is for people to have their pets and their few chickens or whatever for their children and stuff, but I think at the end of the day, we have to remember we're trying to protect the water, and that, if you look globally, like, water is a very precious source, and so I'm trying to look at it from the side of having a couple of chickens and what you could do with them, but at the same time, they're in a very, well, it should be a very protected area because it is a water source, and I think we have to remember that too. So I'm just.
I think we're kind of equating a couple chickens with a hobby farm. I think sometimes a hobby farm is quite a bit more than a couple chickens.
Yeah, exactly.
But really what we're discussing is how far back the setback should be. And some of us were left with the impression it was 70 meters, and some had other impression, I guess. But tonight, all we need to decide is, do we agree with the S1 zone, as Ian has drawn out there, as being no hobby farms in that area, or otherwise. You know, if it's otherwise, then we have to tell them what the otherwise is. Is there any further, oh, sorry, Peter, I didn't see your light.
I'm just wondering what, like, I guess this has been going on like this for a long time, and there don't seem to be a problem. I mean, I think everything seems to be tickety-boo, and then all of a sudden now we're going to be telling people, you know, that's in this S1 zone or whatever, that they can't be doing this and can't be doing that.
Brian, can you fix that mic from the side again? You hit it when you...
What's that?
You just hit it when you picked up your iPad.
Technology problems. Okay, do you have something? Go ahead.
First there.
Who?
Ron.
Oh, go ahead then, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I don't know, I seem to be more mixed up now, because when, like before we were talking 50 and then we went to 75, and I thought it was just 75. I guess I can't agree with the way the S1 zone is set up now, if it's kilometer or 2 kilometers 2 kilometers wide. I know, so I guess what happened was when we were at 50, we thought it was just 50, same as when we went to 75. The only problem is when we were at 50, it would be over a kilometer, because all we did was stretch it out a third. So I don't know, this is all new to me, and and I do understand pretty much what Logan is saying is, and okay, so if we go so we're at 75 meters, does that mean that at 75 meters is the S1 zone? Or is it Forbes Lake? Is that, if we go 75 meters on Forbes Lake, is that what we're calling an S1 zone, or are we calling 2 kilometers an S1 zone? That's what I don't understand.
Go ahead, Logan.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you. Just the Forbes Lake S1 zone is at 75 meters. The 2 kilometers that's being referenced is more related to that source water protection side of things. So source water protection plan, you are allowed hobby farms, but the S1 zoning, you're not. So the S1 zoning for Forbes Lake is the 75 meters that you're saying. The 2 kilometers that we were saying is what's for the some of these source water protection areas. So they're 2 different, unfortunately they're called sort of similar things, and they have some of the similar.
Very much so. You could have a hobby farm as long as you're at least 75 meters away. No?
Not if you're in the S1, not if you're in the S1 zone.
You mean the whole blue area then? You said not that.
Yeah, Ian can probably chime in.
Yeah.
The 75 meters, if we could, is where you can build from. It used to be 50, now we moved it back to 75. That was only the building. All the other things that are in the S1 are permitted. But at the plan advisory, we took the hobby farm out because we thought if you had a hobby farm, then you're into a watershed area where that could leach into the lake. It was just more of a matter of protecting the water source than anything. Along the East River, going down to Plymouth and up through East River Valley and all that, that stays the same, and it has nothing to do with it. This is only for the Forbes Lake, and it's just the 75 meters setback is where you can start building from. They don't want you building too close to the lake, so it was 50, we moved back another 25, so it's 75, and it's the removal of the hobby farm was just a protection to protect the water. That's all it is. So,
Oh, we know that's what
and
it's
it's
for,
and
as
it's
a
only in
matter-
that blue area. So that's
Which is quite a bit bigger area though than what some of us thought. You know,
Yeah.
We didn't understand it right that night maybe, but,
yeah.
Yeah, it's, anything within that blue area, you cannot have a hobby farm, and that amounts to a kilometer or two back, is what it appears to be. If we stay with what we got, that's the way it is. You can't have a hobby farm within that blue area, which is, I don't know if it's a kilometer or 2 kilometers wide or whatever. That's what it is right now, is, I don't know how much protection you need. I agree with protecting the water, but I don't know if a hobby farm, you know, that's, more than 75 kilometers, maybe it would pollute the water. I don't know how you have any way to decide that anymore than a whole lot of other people do this. So we either stay with the no hobby farms within the S1 zone, which is a kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers wide, or we change it, we can still leave it at 75 kilometers or 75 meters, but take the hobby farm part out of it, I guess. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, just one thing I don't understand, Ian, is, I guess a hobby farm, the reason they don't want them there is because of the manure and that they'd be, you know, producing that. But yet you just a few minutes ago told us that people that take manure and put it on their fields and that are there, it's all right. So it's just sort of puzzling how it's not harmful one way or the other.
I guess it's outside that Forbes Lake area that we're talking about, whereas the other spreading the manure on the fields was not in the Forbes Lake S1 zone. We need to come to some conclusion here. Do we leave it the way it is now, which is the S1 zone and no hobby farms within that? Or I'm just talking Forbes Lake here. Is there anybody that disagrees with leaving it the way it is? Okay, 1, 2. Anybody else disagree with leaving it the way it is? 3.
What is it, you're saying the way it is, what is it the way it is? Right?
Well, the way it is that we got an S1 zone around Forbes Lake, and you're not allowed to have any hobby farms within the S1 zone. That's a kilometer or 2 wide and on the end, so there's quite a distance between Forbes Lake, the water, and how far back it goes. You cannot have a hobby farm within that. Once you get outside that, then you could have one. But the 75 meters, as Randy just explained, is more for building buildings, you know, but not for hobby farms. The hobby farms, they were saying, has to be farther out than that 75 meters. That's the way it is right now. Okay, I just want to show our hands before we have a motion. How many are against the way it is now? So we've got about 6, is it? How many do we have there? Everybody get a count? That sounds an awful lot like a tie, at a 6 out of 12. So what are the suggestions then that we do different than what we have now? Is it different setbacks or what? Go ahead, Darrell.
Can we not just have it at the 75 meters?
Have the hobby farming anywhere beyond the 75 meters?
Yes.
That's the way it was, and we changed that. We took the hobby farming out. We changed everything else from 50 to 75, but took the hobby farming out. Go ahead, Randy.
In other words, you're saying to put the hobby farms in the S1 zone, that's what you're saying, right?
Up to, as long as they're 75 meters away.
Yeah, the 75 meters represents for anything, can't be within 75 meters.
Yeah.
We took the hobby farms out, so now you're saying, let's put the hobby farms back in the S1.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that because we had a split vote. It's 6 and 6, you know, so there's just as many one way as there is the other way.
Yeah, but that's what you have to do.
That's what the proposal would be, unless you were to go somewhere.
You either have to put the hobby farm back in or leave it out.
Leave it out, yeah. Really, it comes down to that. Go ahead, Councilor Donnie Becker.
What if you just moved the hobby farm back to, say, 150 meters or 200 meters, and then you'd have a little, like, I know what the problem is, you'd have a manure pile that leaches into the water.
Depending on how far away.
But if you move that further back, I've seen lots of manure piles, they don't leach that. You know, say you went back to 150 meters or more, you might not have that problem, you know, I don't know.
Okay, Councilor Warden, pardon me? Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking that high. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, at the risk of complicating things, the province has designated Forbes Lake as a protected water supply area under provincial regulations, and there are rules in there about manure storage and manure spreading within that primary watershed. So there are some protections for that aspect of it already under provincial regulations.
And do you think they would turn it down then if you said we're gonna allow hobby farms within, as Councillor Donny Park said, with maybe 150 or 100 meters or whatever? Would that be risking getting that turned down because it's a protected watershed area?
To you, Mr. Chair, it's hard to say. I think we've made big strides in these documents as it is, and I wouldn't think this would be the tipping point one way or another. I would think this would have more impact on the perception from the town itself over their concerns being heard.
Okay, so we're kind of stuck in a tight spot here where some think it'd be better to allow the hobby farming and maybe not quite as much distance. You know, and we got 6 people or 6 councillors on one side of it, just kind of leave it as it is, what we came in with tonight, and 6 saying we should change it, so. Okay, we got, I don't know where to start. Councillor Thompson, I think you were first.
So, I understand the concern about the watershed. It's the best municipal water source in the province. We want to protect it. That's full stop. I guess you can tell me, like, the existing farms that are up there now, all of this will not impact them, correct?
Seems that way.
Correct.
And this it's only new activity. If somebody wants to go up there and decide they're gonna raise alpacas or anything that produces waste, and it requires a barn that's over 1,000 square feet, you're on the hook. You can't have that activity in that watershed, correct? And yes. I guess the other thing with this is, like, just because you have land around a watershed doesn't mean you have absolute rights. Like, we've had serious issues with water sources in Canada around agricultural uses, and I'm not saying that there's anything unbecoming of what's going on up there now, but that's where that whole notion comes from, because Walkerton was a result. Walkerton, Ontario, was a result of agricultural farmland near a water source, and it killed 6 or 8 people. So it's something to be taken serious. I don't have a problem with it as is. Leave the hobby farms in there. I guess the biggest problem right now for me is that the landowners around that lake need to have some consultation. That's the challenge, and I don't think they've been fully briefed on this. I've had some phone calls, and I just said, let the process play its way out. And, like, I don't think it's something that we should wait for the second reading of this. Like, they need to have this explained to them so they're comfortable with it, because it's their land. And we always talk about how our decisions may impact the value of somebody's land. I don't want to speak for them. I want them to have the opportunity to speak for themselves. So I don't know how that can happen, but that's probably this watershed, which is in District 11, is probably one of the more restrictive pieces of land in the county after this, in some ways. Not all the ways, but in the rural areas. So I don't know how we have that conversation
with that community, the impacted landowners around there, but that, I think, should happen. And I don't know how that lands in this whole process, but that's the challenge we're facing right now. I know we're under time constraints, but, okay?
Yep, thank you, and I did bring that up at our PAC meeting, and again, I'm not sure how it takes place, because you're talking about meeting with almost a specific group of people, but we may be talking about something here that the landowners aren't terribly concerned about. I don't know, but we're assuming they might be. You know, so we need to, I think, find the answer to that. Go ahead, Councilor McKeel.
Not to beat this like a dead horse, but I do share a lot of the concerns that Councillor Thompson brought up. And I feel like by making these significant changes, they may not seem like a significant change to some of us, but if that is your land or you live near that area, that is a significant change. And I don't think we should just be rushing this through because we need to get it done. This needs to be done properly, and we need to make sure that we're having these conversations with landowners, because I believe it does change the value of their land. And if that was your land and you were, you know, that was a lot of times people's homes and lands, that's their retirements. And I think that it does change the value of it. And we need to have that disclosure to them. One point though, I would like to know, Ian had mentioned that there is provincial legislation as it stands around the Forbes Lake. What is that now, and is ours similar to that? I mean, we have to include it, but I guess what are we adding to it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the Forbes Lake is a watershed protected area designated under the Environment Act. Typically whenever a place is regulated under the Environment Act, it's more to do with activities and not so much development. So the Forbes Lake regulations restrict things like no one is permitted to swim, bathe, wash, or cut ice at any time in Forbes Lake. There are restrictions on having fires. There's restrictions on forestry operations, road construction, application of pest control products, rules around on-site sewage disposal systems, and then there are restrictions on the stockpiling and spreading of manure, restrictions on where manure can be stockpiled, and restrictions on what time of year manure can be spread. And there's a limitation on the size of home heating oil tanks. So they're, specifically related to certain activities. We would be adding on to that and speaking to more specific types of development that could be higher risk to that water supply. This is one of the reasons there is a statement of provincial interest on drinking water supplies, is to kind of deal with the land use aspect of it separate from the activities that are under the provincial regulations.
Okay, anything further under that one? Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Through you, Logan, how is a new landowner or somebody who's going to buy this land notified? Is it buyer beware that that property is a S1, or is it just, would it be told to the people?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the municipality wouldn't be involved in notifying anybody per se. They would have the same access to the land use bylaw and municipal planning strategies as anybody else. So, yeah.
See any more lights? So we need to come to a decision here somewhere, unless you guys made a good one when I was there. But go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Warden. That list that you read that was not allowed in that, it did not have hobby farms in that, did it? Correct?
That's correct, yeah. Through
So hobby farms are allowed in that area as long as it's outside of the 75 meters. Is that correct?
I misspoke earlier. So it's, hobby farms are not allowed within the S1 zone, but they are allowed within source water protection plan areas that aren't part of the S1 zone.
Okay. That's where didn't understand at the PAC was when we said 75, I felt that that was
So did I.
where it was cut off. And then I knew that whatever you call that, second buffer, I knew that we allowed in there, but I thought that fell outside of the 75 meters and the hobby farms were allowed in that. And I'm sure that's what we did pull the hobby farms out of that?
Hobby farms, yes.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Donnie, wait now, I got the wrong light probably. That's your light, is it, right? Okay, I don't see any more lights. I just want to go back to the point that Councillor Thompson was talking about, the people in that area. Should we be consulting with them or not? It appears that, okay, this is cut and dried, that if it's outside of that S1 zone, then, that's what the rule is. We can't change it, no matter what their opinion is. If every one of them was against it, we can't change it. So is that where we're at, that those hobby farms are not allowed, as long as we have an S1 zone, which we do, then the hobby farms are not allowed within that blue area. That seems to be where we're at right now. Whether we withdrew them or not, they're not allowed within, as you just said, Logan, within that area. So we may not get it past the province anyway, then if we said we were going to allow the hobby farms within the S1 area. I'm not sure if we gain anything by having that consultation with those people if we already know what we're going to tell them. I think, though, on the other one, I think we have to stay away from that secondary watershed area in terms of limiting that to an S1 zone, which is what I think New Glasgow wanted us to do. And the Stellarton area seems to be much different. That's not an S1 zone. That we said we weren't making that an S1 zone. Is that right, Ian? For the East River?
The East River is not, underline not, proposed to be an S1 zone.
So it appears we have no choice here. If it's an S1 zone, we've agreed to make an S1 zone, then there cannot be any hobby farms within that S1 zone. So it wouldn't matter if we made a motion one way or the other. It's not going to make any difference, it seems to me, in terms of that. And we can go on and discuss the Stellarton one, but I don't see any way that could be changed. Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
If we did leave the S1 or the hobby farms out of the S1 zone, we could revise our land use bylaw at a later date if landowners determine that they were interested.
Are they allowed to come here for ask that, though?
No, well, they could, and then we can rezone, we could do
Rezone it from an S1.
We can add that to an S1, could we not, Brian?
I thought you said S1, no hobby farms.
No, we're saying that, but let's say you want to go to the people. But going to the people, that's a lot of work going to each landowner within that S1 zone.
If we can't change it anyway.
But in the future, let's say somebody said, I want a hobby farm and they're 2 kilometers down the road. Then we could change our bylaw to reflect that. Could we not, Brian?
Yeah. The decision to have hobby farms or not have hobby farms is a policy decision, really, of council. The PAC said, we do not want them in that watershed, primary watershed, which is the blue area. So that's what is zoned as S1.
Yep.
You've zoned that primary watershed as an S1 to provide a higher level of protection to it. So if you choose at some future date to say hobby farms are allowed, you go back and you amend your documents, you go through your process.
You can do
right?
it.
You can do that. I think an important fact, the province of Nova Scotia and the town of Glasgow own about 25% of that land in that primary watershed today. They are the two major landowners. So 25, I think the number was 25% of all the land in that primary watershed is owned by either the province or New Glasgow. There's approximately, I think, 4,000 acres in the primary watershed. But to me, it's a policy decision. Do you allow them or not
Within that S1 zone?
within that S1 zone?
Okay, I thought I understood here a few minutes ago, it was S1, you just plain couldn't have them there, but we could just change our policy and say we could.
Yeah, they could be included in, right now, they're in the excluded list, along with a bunch of service station, obnoxious uses, industrial type uses. So
It might be hard to change that policy because the town, you have to, obviously work in cooperation with the town, and they're not gonna be in a hurry when you mention to them that you're gonna change that policy, I don't think,
but ultimately, it is your
it's
decision.
our decision, yeah.
It's your document. They are to be consulted, provide input, but ultimately, council has to decide on your document.
Okay, do you wanna leave it for tonight and?
Am I on side with that, Ian? With those statements?
You wanna leave it for tonight and knowing that, okay, if we wanna change it someday, we have the power as this council to change that. It's not that the province or somebody's telling us, no, you can't have them, we can change it. But it seems we're kinda split on it tonight anyway, and we can waste more time on it, but I don't think we're going to, change anything. Go ahead, Joe.
Ian, so the province's rules about the watershed, does that even allow a hobby farm in there, close to that?
Go ahead, Ian.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so specifically for the Forbes Lake watershed protected area?
Yes.
Yeah, so their rules on that protected area control, let me see here, you have to have a nutrient management plan prepared by a qualified person. You have to, there's limits on pasturing animals. Basically, it has to be in conformance with that nutrient management plan. And there's rules about where you can stockpile manure and when you can spread manure. So it's not outright prohibited by the provincial regulations. It's just limited. You can have livestock operations in there under the provincial rules. You just have controls on how you do that.
So thus, whatever we put in here is overrid by the provincial rules.
Yes, so if you decide to permit hobby livestock farms in the S1 zone, they can do them, but they'll still have to meet those provincial rules about manure storage and all of that kind of stuff. If you prohibit them, then they won't be able to do them. It's really a case of the more restrictive rules apply.
Okay, I think I'll let Peter have the last say, and we'll move on here.
Just one thing I was just wondering there when you were talking about having the people and discussing it with the residents, is that there's one piece of the puzzle there that I think would be really concerning to a lot of these residents, is the one where you weren't sure if it was 6 months or a year, but if they closed down for that, they'd be history. They turn around, they wouldn't be allowed to open up again. So, there's stuff like that they should be made aware of and see how they feel about it.
I think that's going to happen all over our county. If you're in a zone and you close down for too long, then you can't go back to being non-conforming in any zone after that time period. If you had a garage and you were in, say, Lions Brook somewhere and it wasn't the proper zoning, but you were there already, so your grandfather. But if you close the garage down for 2 years and then decide to reopen it yourself or sell it to somebody, you'd be past that period of time, is my understanding, when you could have that non-conforming use.
But is it fair, like, okay, right now, we've seen with the hurricanes and what happened there, people's roofs were blown off, their siding was blown off. There's still to this day people trying to get carpenters. You can't get them. So if somebody said they had a barn burned down or something, they could take 3 years before they'd ever get somebody to put that barn back up for them. But they'd be done because they weren't operating their business. They couldn't.
And I don't know if there's special considerations or not for, circumstances. Do you want to comment on that, Ian, or?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So I just checked. First of all, we did extend that. So under the Act, it's 6 months. We have extended in these documents to 12 months. So you have a year before you would lose that status. And yeah, the idea is that the use has actually been discontinued or abandoned. So in a situation where the barn burns down and you're waiting for it to rebuild and you're still continuing farm operations around it, that sort of thing, I wouldn't consider that discontinued. Or if you sell off 1 year's worth of cattle and then buy new ones the next year in the spring or whatever, it's more that like you've turned it to something else, you've shut down your farm and now you're running Airbnb, glamping or something like that. You've changed the use or you abandon the land. But there is a consideration for that ongoing operation.
Okay, so there are special circumstances here. I think where, they're not gonna rule you out because you couldn't get a new roof on your barn in time. Let's move along to the, we didn't do the Stellarton water source protection. I don't believe we talked about it a lot, but is everybody all right on what we're doing with the East River for Stellarton's water protection area? It's not an S1 area, so there's no worry about farms within that. What does it mean for the people that live along that river valley? What are their restrictions, let's say? I don't know if you heard me or not, did you?
Sorry?
Are you hearing me?
No, it garbled up a bit there. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Going back to the East River Valley and the restrictions for Stellarton, what are the restrictions on those landowners?
So in the East River watershed, as well as the secondary watershed of Forbes Lake, so the larger beyond the lake itself, as well as that small portion of the Antigonish watershed, so those 3 areas, they would be prohibited having some of those, no matter what the zoning is underneath, they would be prohibited some of those obnoxious, potentially risky uses that Logan recently read, and I can bring up the list again here. So in those areas, and this is specifically like the land use, automobile fueling, so this doesn't stop someone from jerry canning their car. This is like a gas station. Automobile washing, so again, a car wash. Cemeteries, hazardous industrial uses, heavy equipment repair, heavy equipment sales and rentals, heavy industrial uses, mineral-related uses, scrapyards, solid waste disposal, that's your landfills, and warehousing and light industrial uses involving the bulk storage of chlorinated organic compounds, petroleum solvents, or petroleum fuels, excluding propane. So in those areas, those particular uses would be prohibited.
And how far back from the East River? Is there
that would be, as currently drafted, it would be that entire watershed.
So none of those, when you say watershed, is that 1,000 meters back? Or is that how far back do you go before you say it's?
It totally varies depending, but it's a good chunk of it's basically from the high points of land draining into that river.
Okay,
so
but we're talking those specific restrictions there. Are there any questions for Ian then on the Stellarton water protection or the one down James River? And I think you mentioned one other that, is there any questions on those restrictions in those areas? Because there was concern about farms in the East River Valley, but it appears it's not to restrict farms at all. It's all these other activities. I guess whatever's already there, though, is allowed to continue.
Correct.
Go ahead, Chester.
They couldn't took a drive up the East River. Every cemetery's on the bank of the river, so I don't think you looked at that very hard. And if I know
they're already there.
They're already there.
Grandfather did. Great-grandfather.
Or farther back than that, but it's just there's some of it makes sense and there's some of it don't make any sense. So anyway, we'll just go with the flow for now, and then the battle will start when we have to start changing things here. But anyway, it just drives me crazy, and it always has, that when something's working right, Halifax wants to change it because it's not working right. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. We've sort of hashed around the East River Valley one before, I guess. So what are we on to next then, Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll quickly share here. Where did that go? Okay. So, yeah. No, that's it for that. So don't even go there. We did send the documents off to the province for comment before first reading. They didn't get their comments back to us until after first reading. So the Wellfields issue was one of them that they flagged, but the other one that they flagged is that the minimum planning requirements require a policy in the plan describing your procedures to be followed for when you're doing amendments. And they've come out with an interpretation that you need to have specific language referencing a public participation policy. So we had policy in there, but it wasn't as clear as they wanted. So we have added policy to the draft coming out of the PAC discussion to clearly meet that provincial requirement. So it doesn't substantially change anything about the documents, but it makes it more compliant with those regulations. Any questions about that?
No, seem to be good.
Yeah. The other big change in terms of how these documents function, I suppose, was the watercourse buffer. So the last draft that you reviewed as a council had a watercourse buffer, a minimum distance the development needed to be from the ordinary high water mark of inland watercourses and from the top of bank of coastal watercourses from the coast. So all development had to be set back from those watercourses. The most recent draft that you reviewed had a map at the end of it, Schedule D, that identified just specific major, what we call the major watercourses, so larger ones to which that buffer applied. So only certain watercourses had the buffer around them, and if it wasn't on that map, the buffer did not apply. There was concern from a member of the public about that approach and a request to have the buffer apply to all watercourses. PAC discussed that request and directed us to take that approach. So we have removed that map that identifies specific watercourses and just say that the buffer applies to all watercourses, large or small. And we've also updated the definition of watercourse to not be as broad as it had been. So it's not applying to springs. I think in the original draft it applied to ravines and stuff like that, which was an overreach in terms of what a watercourse is. So we've updated it to be much more to limit it, and also to clarify that natural body of water. So it's not applying to ditches and that kind of thing. So so the drafts have the watercourse buffer apply to all watercourses as defined in that definition on the screen. We have also added a map to show there's questions about, when is a coast versus inland? When do you apply it from the ordinary high water mark versus the top of bank? So we added a map that kind of provides a cutoff point so the development officer can determine whether you're coastal or whether you're inland from that watercourse perspective.
Okay, so you see the change there that the PAC recommended. It had been down, as Ian said, to 2 rivers, I think, or 3, whatever was mapped. and now it's for all water courses, again limiting the definition of a water course to some degree. And a member of the public, maybe more, but made a very good argument, I guess, for why we should go back to, you know, protecting all of our water courses. And that was accepted by the PAC, and handing it on here tonight for discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Warden. No, my concern with this here is who determines it's a water course, because our development officer can't. So it was mentioned at the PAC that the person who is saying that it is a water course will have to get a accredited person to come out to verify that is, because our development officer is not certified to say that's a stream or that's a brook, or a lot of people, if it's a ditch going down through that, they'll say it's a water course, but it's just water runoff. So it's really up to the landowner or the person that's making the claim to determine whether it's going to be a water course or not. So they'll have to get a professional to determine that. So.
And there are people to do that. I've been involved in some of those in the farming business, and if somebody sees a little minnow, you're done. That's a brook. You know, and it takes a lot to disprove that it's a brook for the Department of Environment anyway. But we thought otherwise. I think we were leaving a lot of our rivers, brooks unprotected here by saying we're only going to, you know, protect the two of them or three of them. So that was the decision made by the PAC, was to extend it to all water courses. So that's where it stands, as it will go forward now to first reading, unless there's any wishes to change it, I guess. I should bring up at this point, just in fairness to one of our members of the PAC, a public member, not one of the councillors, felt very strongly that we should not only reverse this from what we were, but to go back to the S1 on all the coasts, from the G1 or G2, whatever we have it in now. And her argument was, well, if you could change it all in one night for one way, you should be able to change it back the other way. But I think the majority of the PAC members that night felt that the whole coastal issue, whether we're dealing with the S1 zone, whether we're dealing with the what the government pulled back on, the Coastal Protection Act, that we should deal with that all as one when the time comes to deal with our coast, rather than try and reverse it at this time. It seems like it should be something that was done all at the same time when we have the appropriate time to deal with that issue. But so that the PAC's decision was not to reverse that at the present time anyway, unless we can find better ways to do it. So I just, in fairness to her, I thought I should bring that up tonight anyway, that she was quite insistent on wanting us to change it, but in the end we didn't. Okay, where are we at now? So if there's no comments, or I don't think I'm missing any on the water course changes, what do we got next, Ian?
Okay, and then finally, thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a couple of other small things that PAC directed. One, there was a written submission at the public hearing for these two properties here. It had been requested that they be rural mixed use. We had made it that in the first reading, and then it got reverted somehow by accident in the public hearing draft. So there was a letter from the landowner requesting that be corrected. So that is now corrected in the draft back to the rural mixed use zone as that had been requested. The topsoil question. So as you may recall, the draft documents have a map in them that identifies all the quote-unquote agricultural lands as defined in the Statement of Provincial Interest on regarding agriculture. So those are lands that are classified Class 2, Class 3, or active Class 4, or specialty crops under the Canada Land Inventory. That's how the Statement of Provincial Interest defines agricultural land. So we are required to identify those lands in the plan, and we are required to provide some sort of protection for them under the Statement of Provincial Interest. And one of the suggested things is limiting topsoil removal. So that is the primary tool these documents use to protect those lands. So there is a prohibition on removing topsoil on properties that are covered by the agricultural lands overlay, except incidental to, you know, things going on in the property. So if you're building a house, of course, you're going to move some topsoil to do that. You know, that's not prohibited, but really it's meant to prevent the mining of topsoil as a product. That being said, there are existing topsoil businesses within these areas. They would be protected under those non-conforming provisions, but the non-conforming provisions of the Act don't allow expansion, and that's a little confusing in the context of topsoil removal. What does it mean? You know, where's the boundary of that use, and what does it mean to have it expand? So, can you expand to your property boundaries, or are you literally limited to the area you're currently extracting topsoil? So what we have done to clarify that is we've tried to identify existing topsoil removal businesses and properties associated with those businesses, and specifically call them out by PID, by property identification number in the documents, and clarify that they are allowed to expand to the extent fully within those PIDs. So there is a list now in the land use bylaw, and I think in the summary of changes document, we actually specifically list those PIDs that are where we say, yep, these are properties that are known to have topsoil removal on them already or are associated with businesses that do that, and we expect, or it's clear that they are permitted to expand on those properties. All that being said, there is no centralized list of topsoil removal properties. So we did our best with the, talking with staff, using property records to try and identify any of those properties. I can't promise that it's an exhaustive list of every topsoil business that exists or every property where that currently happens within the municipality. We did specifically try and capture all the properties associated with the one business who had raised the concern, and tried to capture more if we could, but if anyone's aware of any that we missed, certainly it would be good to capture those between now and first reading.
You're all right, Councilor Turner? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? We did try to accommodate. We're not out to shove people out of business here, but going forward, we need to limit this type of action, and there hasn't been anything to prevent it. I own about 30 acres of interval land, and somebody could come along and offer me a fortune tomorrow worth far more than agriculture could ever pay, and that 30 acres would then be gone. So I think it's a good thing we're doing, but at the same time, we don't want to be putting people out of business. So that's the effort that's been made here, those that are already in the business, to try and give them, a future. But at some point it will stop. But we have to do that on a gradual basis to be fair to people. Okay, I don't see any lights on, so we can move on in.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And then the last two things were kind of more housekeeping items. We caught a reference in the bylaw to signage that, if you'll recall, we previously stripped out anything related to controlling signage. We had missed one section, so we removed that to clean that up. And then finally, there are policies in the plan on the municipal planning strategy side of things to allow energy systems and to allow adaptive reuse of former institutional buildings through the development agreement process. So there's policy to do those things by a development agreement, but you also have to enable that in the zoning in the land use bylaw, and we had missed doing that, so we caught that and added those links to the land use bylaw side of things. So it doesn't functionally change anything, it just makes sure that the bylaw is carrying out the intent of the plan. So those were both more housekeeping, and then that is the extent of the changes that came out of the PAC discussion.
Okay, so we've had a review of everything that was discussed by the PAC and is being brought here for council to know what those changes are, and then it'll go forward to our, in our next meeting, to our first reading again. And hopefully we can get by public hearing and second reading next time. Do we need to have a motion to accept this? We're just advising people tonight of what the changes were, so they know when it comes to first reading, it won't be a surprise to anybody. So I know we spent quite a bit of time on this, but I think it is important that people have a real good understanding going into this first reading. And we've been accused by some people of, you know, we've mentioned light a lot, going light. Some people think we went too light. And I'm sure there's some that think we're going too heavy. So if we can find that fine line in between, that might be just about the right place. So if there's no more questions, we'll move on. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wadden.
Just, Ian, perhaps you can tell me where we could find that list of PIDs for the topsoil removal, places that have the topsoil removal?
I think it was in our.
I can find it.
In the summary.
Okay, no, okay.
Yeah. I remember seeing it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move along then to the, oh, sorry.
Do we need motion?
No, I asked him, he said no.
PAC has recommended it to council, so it'll go there.
Okay, let's move along then to the next item on our agenda, which is recreation startup grants. Councillor Thompson. Thank you, yes.
Good night.
Right now.
Resolution, be it resolved that the municipality of the county of Pictou approve the following recreation startup grant. Bridgeville Community Club, $350 for community program. Dated at Pictou, Nova Scotia, this 24th day of March, 2025, signed by myself and seconded by Councillor Chester Dewar.
So seconded?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for a startup grant, for, you said Bridgeville? Yeah. Okay, any questions on that motion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Against, motion carried. And now we'll move along to the Abercrombie Fire Department levy. Councillor Turner, are you looking after that one?
No, I can speak to it
Okay.
if you want.
Brian's going to speak to it anyway.
Yeah, so the memo was included in your package. Abercrombie did request an increase of its fire levy to 12 cents per 100. The request was received prior to the deadline, just misfiled. And they did have their public meeting. So all the conditions of our policy were met on that one.
That's from 10 cents to 12 cents. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, Councillor Wadden had asked that we discuss the Little Harbor rate. Little Harbor is looking to roll back their rate, 2 cents, for this upcoming fiscal year. Our policy actually doesn't ever contemplate that a rate would be rolled back, so this is new territory for us. So the intent here tonight would be that these area rates would be part of the resolution that would go to April along with the West River rate for formal approval. We just wanted them introduced prior to a resolution being
So do we
formally
need a
approved.
motion tonight?
No,
No
no.
motion, just come to the April meeting.
Yeah, kind of more for information purposes.
Yeah.
Where this is a council meeting, if you technically did a motion, you'd be binding it tonight, so we'll do them all.
Do them all on April.
In April.
Meeting. Okay, do you have a comment,
Yeah.
Councillor Wadden?
Yes, 3 years ago, they increased the rate by 2 cents to pay for their truck. And so they had told the residents at our ratepayers meeting that when the truck was paid, they would remove that 2 cents. So that's why they're following through on it this year.
Okay, let's move along to the switch policy. I think there's some slight changes there. Brian, you got those with you?
Sure. So the policy, Julian Boyle presented at the last climate change meeting, and it was just a slight change in the participation agreement for solar projects, just based on where markets are now, available rebates and things like that. The payback period on those is probably would push the 10-year limit, so maybe even a little more, depending on the size of the installation. So it was just felt that extending, and it's only for solar battery projects, to extend the loans to a 15-year period. All other projects, energy efficient, would remain at the 10-year.
Okay, so again, is that coming forward at the April meeting? Is this
No,
just notice?
yes, so this is notice, because you do have to give 7 days notice of policy
Okay.
change, so.
So this is notice that at the April council meeting,
this
we'll
policy
be
would be
dealing with
adopted.
that, and there'll be more information in the package coming?
Yeah, the policy was circulated
Okay.
tonight, so that's in essence the policy.
Any comments or questions on the slight changes to the switch policy? Go ahead, Councilor Donovan.
So, what was the, I guess the question I have is, what was the rationale to, it was 7 to 8 years as the payback before. What was the rationale for the higher payback?
Really market, things like interest rates, things of that.
Doesn't
they're
the higher electricity rates lower the payback, lower your term? Wouldn't the higher, like every time they jack the electricity rates up, wouldn't that lower your
Yeah, it's also the
payback?
availability of grants to offset some of the capital costs. They're diminishing
Okay.
as well, so it was kind of felt, it was a balancing type thing. You don't want to discourage it, so by extending it, that 5 years, you'll keep the level of interest, I guess.
All right, thanks.
Okay, there's no more comments or questions on that one. We'll move right along to the accessibility plan, MOPC accessibility plan, which has been worked on for, well, the whole year, I guess, by our accessibility committee. And so this one, again, Brian, just to be clear, are we approving this one tonight then?
Yes, this one
Okay.
would be an actual approval.
All right, so we need to finish this one, not just vote it
Yes,
on.
this one has to be done by April
Okay,
1.
Has everybody had an opportunity, I hope, to read through what, there's quite detailed in there as to what they're doing in transportation and building infrastructure and whatnot, so there's quite a bit to it, but are there any questions or concerns about this accessibility plan? Go ahead, Councillor Wood.
Just on the transit, is there any long-range plans to become involved with the transit system, other than the wellness center?
I don't know what, I can't remember what I read in here about accessibility. I think they talked, yeah, it's very limited in the rural area, but the plan all along has been, you know, Glasgow and Stellarton first. If that was successful, then move on to Westville, Pictou, Trenton, and I think Pictou Landing maybe. And if that's successful, then to look at the rural area and decide what areas would be first to try. And it's obviously the ones that are closest to the urban center. That still is the plan as far as I know at the last mayors and wardens meeting, whenever it comes up, that is the plan. And I haven't heard the most recent update on how the smaller towns are doing. It's a different setup. They're moved into the circle, and you get onto that circle somewhere, and then you're taken back to your own hometown. But I haven't heard from anybody. We have a shared services and mayors and wardens coming up a week from today, I guess. we'll probably hear something then about how, it needed some time to see how it was gonna perform.
Okay, if it's discussed, could you report back to the council, just so we'll know where we're
Sure,
standing?
yeah.
Thank you.
It just needs some time, I think probably a year or so under this format to see they were profiting pretty good on the Stewart and the Glasgow, picking up more passengers all the time too, so it looked promising, and I think it's going pretty good, but I just don't know enough to say that for sure. I thought there was something in here.
Yeah, it doesn't specifically say we're exploring that. There was some discussion, I guess, the other night about subsidization of transit fares or transit passes, which falls right now more in line with the service that Chad's providing, and we are doing that to some degree already, but so there is a recognition of that, but not a broader transit at this point. But that was identified by council to do, so we do have that on a list for a future meeting here in the next month or so to.
Okay, are there any other questions on the accessibility plan before we vote on that one?
Need a motion.
Yeah, I do need a motion, yeah. You move it and need a, yeah, and Joe seconded. I don't see any lights on, so I'm gonna call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Motion carried, thank you. And we'll now move on to the anti-racism plan. Okay, so again, it was sent out ahead of time. I will say at the front of that one, there is a warden's message, and that is, I discussed this with Sue Ann this morning. That is not the message that I wrote. Anybody reading it will know it's not my writing, and so I think Sue Ann's just gonna change it to a message from council or something to that effect. I just didn't want my name on it when I hadn't written it, so I just wanted people to be clear on that. Okay, any comments, questions?
I'll just
Go
very
ahead,
briefly,
Brian.
this is a requirement of law that we have a plan in place. So this has been worked on by the municipalities, all the municipalities in Pictou County. One of the key things that will come out of this is a committee. The town of Glasgow have had an established committee for a number of years on diversity and equity, and each of the units will be invited to join that. So committee, so we will be asked to appoint a staff person and a council member to that committee in the month or so type thing. Glasgow have to go back and change their terms of reference to allow broader community participation, but that way all the units will be basically interacting with the various user groups and really streamlining the effort, so we're not all doing our own thing on this. So, but as I say, this is a requirement of law that the municipality have a plan.
This is one step along the way, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and this is the first step.
Okay, any questions or comments on the anti-racism policy here in front of you, draft regional plan, I guess we call it. Okay, not seeing any, we'll call for the vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion.
Who moved it?
Oh, we didn't get a motion. Okay, we just moved it anyway. Okay, who's gonna second it? Okay, moved by Councillor Watt, seconded by Councillor Turner. Now we'll try a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Must be getting late. Down to the last one. No, we're beyond the
That's
last
it.
one.
That's it.
We're down to adjournment now. This declares, oh, go ahead. Chester has something. Sorry, Chester.
Yep, this is very important for all of us around the table, because I'm pretty sure it's liable to affect some of the rest of us. couple of months ago, I lost a beautiful plaque that was put up on a old mill grindstone in Lorne for the Dunbars, and it was a big deal. Like the Clan Dunbar had a meal and they always had their gatherings, and somebody stole this plaque. And I put the word out and spoke to all the junkyards and the police, and over the weekend on the cairn in Churchville, they lost 2 of the same size plaques. And the same thing happened here in Halliburton or around, and it was on the radio tonight when I was coming down here. The Mounties are trying to do what they can. So in your communities, you have these bronze plaques. They're on war memorials. They're on, well, some of them used to even be on trees for the first old church services, etc. happened. I would almost advise you to, if there was somebody in the community that you knew, maybe take that have that plaque taken off of there before somebody takes it off, because the plaque that went away was going to be over $3,000 to replace it. Okay, and they're only going to get $30 for scrap for it. And the ones in Churchville, they're bigger and longer, and there's all kinds of them around the countryside. Like the McDonald's have them, and the Stewarts have them, and the Grants have them, different places, and Sutherland's, where they have these stones, and they likely thought they'd be forever. So some of the people around, and I'm hoping that when they catch them, they're from the city or somewhere. I can't imagine people from Pictou County stealing from their ancestors. But anyway, I just wanted to put it out there that if there's something, the Legion or the war memorials or something, if there's some way of lightening it up more, that's what they said to me. Why don't we put another light there, Chester? Well, all that's going to do is make it better for them to steal it at 4:30 in the morning. But I just wanted to put it out there that this problem's happening. I thought it was just an isolated incident at home because it's up the end of my interval. There's 30 acres there and this old grindstone there. But these memorials are up all kinds of places, and the people that are taking it have no respect for what's happening. So anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I must get down and check the log church. I bet there's a big plaque down there. Nice and dark at night down there. Yeah, I better not advertise it. Okay, wait, sorry, Deputy Warden Murray.
Like for the Grants Committee to stay for a few minutes after the meeting, so we have a few things we've got to discuss.
So the 6 of us that are on the Grants Committee, they get to stay for a few minutes. She mentioned that to me this morning. It was completely gone.